We have exhausted our supply of meals ready to eat for today.
What?
Please remain calm. Don't be set free. Hey, can we get some water?
Imagine if we lived in a world where the population had dropped from just under 8 billion to 1 million people. At first, the idea of a million people is still a lot of people, and it is. But in comparison to the previous worldwide population of 7.75 billion people, well, a million people doesn't seem like all that much. Major metropolitan cities have populations well into the millions, some even reaching tens of millions. Tokyo, for example, has over 37 million inhabitants. So if one city alone could manage 37 million, imagine how just a million people could be spread across the entire world. Today on Life's Biggest Questions, we'll be asking, what happens if only 1 million of the population survived? Welcome back to LBQ. I'm the dark voice of despair, Jared Bronstein, and today we got a very interesting one for you guys. Make sure you stick around for the bonus content we have at the end of this one, and let us know in the comments below some other questions you want answered. For now, let's get right into it and talk about what happens if only 1 million of the population survived. Before anything, we need to talk about what wiped out 99.9% of the population. Obviously, given our current situation, it'd be easy to say some sort of virus, which could have been the case. Although highly unlikely and, well, impossible, let's just say this virus wiped out everyone. There's only 1 million people left on Earth. Now what happens? Obviously things change, drastically. At first, your city or town would definitely be more quiet, assuming the virus made its way to your area. Considering how some areas are currently being affected more so than others, I think it's safe to say the same would be applicable to our hypothetical scenario. Some towns and cities would have more of a population than others, due to the fact that the virus didn't spread among them as much, or at the very least wasn't as deadly. Now, due to the fact that the virus did wipe out almost the entire human race, you can bet that their bodies definitely weren't properly disposed of. Now, it's not like everyone dropped dead at the same time. Obviously, this happened over the course of a few months or even years. But still, eventually, as the numbers started to decline, so would the upkeep. Some people would drop dead in the street and then just sit there to dispose, or possibly be a meal for animals. Not to say the streets would look like a scene in The Walking Dead, but it wouldn't be very far off. Depending how hard your specific area was hit would determine your current living conditions. It's possible all your family and friends are fine, and your entire neighborhood, for the most part, seems fairly normal. It's also possible you're not as fortunate, and the majority of your family and friends fall victim to the virus. Regardless of circumstance, everything in your life would change. At some point, the world's leaders would need to make decisions in regards to who ultimately makes the decisions, and assuming a handful of them do fall victim to the fatal illness, as do their colleagues, who would run certain countries? Of course, you could say you keep going down the line of politicians, which is fine, but eventually it would trickle down to unqualified people making very important decisions. What I'm saying is the government wouldn't be run the same way. Let's say the entire country of the United States has a population of 10,000 now. Odds are, of the 10,000, very few would be qualified to be in office. This is based on the fact that the average American, myself included, hasn't spent majority of their lives studying the necessary material to hold such a position. Some countries may have smaller populations than some cities. Either way, it seems the majority of those left would go by a majority rule political system. However, not all survivors would necessarily be a regular guy like you and me, who understand the importance of voting for specific rules and regulations among our new society. Some of the population would include babies, toddlers, and even children and teenagers, as well as the elderly. Although it's quite possible the virus would wipe out the majority of the elderly based on statistics alone, it doesn't necessarily mean they would all fall victim. There's also important factors as to what positions people hold or what they're qualified to do. If among your city or town survivors there's a doctor, that person would be of incredible value. Same would go for someone who knew how to grow food or hunt. Basic survival comes back into play here, and those who can adapt the best would be able to live the longest. However, not every decision would be voted among thousands of people. Eventually, a group or a single person would be appointed to make decisions. Maybe city or town meetings would be held on a weekly basis. Either way, new governments would be formed, and people would be relied upon to come together and try to make the transition into their new lives as easy as possible. Over the course of the population depleting, grocery stores would start to see smaller and smaller orders less often. Gas stations would run out of gas more frequently, taking more time than usual to refuel. All stores would eventually have issues restocking products. At first, there would be a major panic, and things would seem quite chaotic. As the virus started to spread, and assuming the world went into lockdown, most people would die in their homes. Still, some would end up in the streets, and as previously mentioned, seeing a handful of bodies on the streets wouldn't be uncommon. Looting would also occur, with people realizing it's nearly the end of the world and things like canned goods and even toilet paper are necessities. There would be an increase in violent crimes on the way to the 1 million mark, out of panic and fear as well. When all was said and done, and the Earth's population did come down to 1 million, the streets would be quite a mess. People would form their own communities and governments based on the amount of people left in their neighborhoods. Although some would want to be off on their own to fend for themselves, the majority of the remaining population would want to stick together in said town or city. At this point, assuming you're living in a neighborhood or town of a few dozen to a few hundred people, things like money and politics wouldn't be of much importance. Odds are, societies would go back to a barter-type service, where people's skills are used in exchange for other skills. An example of this is someone hunting dinner for a family in exchange for a sweatshirt knitted by said family. You get the point I'm trying to make. In a world where it's more so about survival than luxury and materialism, money is worthless. It's all about your skills and what you can offer. This would force a good majority of the population to not only change their diet to plant-based, but also learn how to farm and harvest. Wow, I'm starting to realize I really wouldn't want to be a part of this world. All joking aside, this could also be an option for some. Unfortunately, our scenario here isn't a movie, meaning it's possible that people lose everything, their friends, family, and they're left on a desolate earth, tasked with surviving alone. Obviously, said person can meet other people, but the point I'm getting at is, at what point would one decide this isn't an earth or a world they would want to be a part of? It's quite possible a lot of people take their own lives with quite literally nothing to live for. Anything imported to your country would eventually stop being imported altogether as well, which is why I previously mentioned things like gas in the grocery store no longer being an option. Trade deals between countries would be non-existent, and another issue would be language barriers. Unfortunately, if the world's population was brought down to just 1 million, it's not like every person would be fluent in English. Depending on the situation, it is possible your city doesn't get affected and the rest of the world does, leaving the 1 million remaining to be a lot of people you know, including family and friends. But I'm not sure what catastrophic event could happen that would lead to the entire world's population declining, leaving just 1 million in the exact same place, which means the population would be spread across the world. Some cities may have hundreds of people, while some countries may have a few dozen. The division of people would be incredibly uneven, making it harder or easier to live depending on how you work with others. There is a silver lining here, although I'm not so sure it's necessarily worth the hassle. The Earth would be a much cleaner place, or would it? With less people, you'd think the air would be cleaner, the streets would be less busy, and over the years, eventually that may happen. But at first, it would be a nightmare. The smell of death would literally be everywhere, the streets would be pretty empty and quiet, and it's possible there are animals that normally wouldn't come to the city, at least often, prowling around, feeding on the corpses lying around. All in all, it seems if only 1 million people survived, the world really wouldn't be the best place to live. Eventually, it could be possible to repopulate and start a society over. As previously mentioned, 1 million is a lot of people, but it would be tough to get the million people all together working hand in hand. Aside from language barriers, even traveling to each other would be difficult. Not everyone knows how to control a plane or a train. Some people can't even drive cars. Gas would also be an incredibly valuable asset, although travel is important, so is electricity and heat, which can both be powered by gas. But again, eventually the gas would also run out, so you would need to change the way you live. Everything would simply be about survival. And as Darwin once said, it wouldn't be the strongest or the smartest that survive, but the ones that can adapt the best. And that is what would happen if only 1 million of the population survived. I want to know if you think you'd be able to survive or adapt in the comments below. I think when it comes to life or death, you always find a way. Anyways guys, gonna reply to some of your comments now from the video. Who is behind The Simpsons predicting the future? Bad Boy DCX said, am I gonna be a virgin forever? Simpson. There's an episode for that? Yes. I'm sorry, buddy. Well, I mean, if The Simpsons made an episode about it, you know it's gonna happen. Or I guess in this case, maybe for you it won't. Sorry. The Lonely Skeleton 2001 said the question is, does it predict the future or do people watch it and go, yeah, let's do that? Maybe a bit of both. I guess, I mean, I don't know though. Do you think Trump saw the episode and was like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna run for president. Maybe he did. I don't know. You never know. It'd be a funny story if he's just like, I decided to be president because I saw an episode on The Simpsons. It'd be pretty funny. I don't know. The Simpsons has predicted some pretty crazy stuff, but yeah, I don't know. Video Game Drummer Production said, the show has way too many jokes about what could happen in the future. Some of them were bound to become true. I don't know about that. I mean, yeah, again, I get what you're saying, but like, again, Trump being president, that's a very specific person to be president. I don't know, just a little crazy to me, but anyways, guys, gonna wrap this one up. I've been your host, Jared Bronstein. You guys have been watching Life's Biggest Questions, and we'll see you guys in the next one.